Section 1. A most disturbing incident at afternoon tea. The garden at Willow Cottage had always been a haven of tranquility, and this particular afternoon promised to be no different. A soft hum of conversation blended harmoniously with the chirping of birds and the gentle rustle of leaves in the old oak trees. The ladies of St. Mary Mead were comfortably seated around tables draped in lace tablecloths, each laden with fine china teacups, sandwiches, and Mrs. Bantry's famous scones. It was precisely this predictable serenity that made the disruption so very shocking. Miss Jane Marple, sitting comfortably near a cluster of rose bushes, sipped delicately at her tea. Her sharp blue eyes, however, were not occupied with her cup. They were discreetly observing Colonel Henry Plumer and his wife, Eleanor, engaged in what appeared to be an unusually tense conversation near the garden gate. The colonel, known for his jovial disposition, appeared flushed and distressed, while Eleanor seemed unusually rigid, her mouth drawn into a thin line of suppressed anger. "Oh dear," murmured Miss Marple softly to herself, adjusting the wool shawl draped across her thin shoulders. "I do wonder what that's about." The thought was barely completed when a sudden cry pierced the tranquil air, transforming gentle murmurs into startled exclamations. It came from within the house, and it was unmistakably a scream. A woman's scream, high-pitched, raw with shock and horror. Miss Marple placed her teacup gently on the saucer, exchanging a brief, knowing glance with Mrs. Bantry, whose face had turned pale beneath her carefully applied rouge. "My heavens, Jane," Mrs. Bantry whispered, gripping her friend's hand tightly. "What can have happened?" The guests were already rising from their seats, moving hesitantly toward the cottage, curiosity tempered by apprehension. Miss Marple stood too, unobtrusively positioning herself toward the edge of the small, anxious crowd that gathered by the French doors leading inside. It was Dorothy, Mrs. Bantry's loyal housemaid, who appeared in the doorway, trembling violently. Her hand gripped the frame as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. She opened her mouth twice before managing to speak, her voice quivering and barely audible. "It's Miss Angela," she whispered, her eyes wide with fright. She's dead." In the drawing room, a stunned silence fell over the group. Angela Hartley, the beloved niece of Colonel Plumer, young and vivacious, scarcely 23, had been laughing merrily only moments before, pouring tea and handing around cucumber sandwiches. To imagine her now, lifeless and silent, seemed utterly impossible. Yet, as the guests pressed hesitantly into the cottage, the dreadful reality became undeniable. The drawing room, normally cheerful and inviting, was shadowed now by a dark silence. Angela lay sprawled awkwardly beside the ornate upholstered stool that had always held pride of place near the fireplace. Her hair, a golden halo in the fading sunlight, cascaded around her pale, frozen face. Her eyes, still open, stared blankly toward the ceiling in an expression of startled disbelief. Miss Marple quietly took in the details. Her gaze flicked swiftly but unobtrusively around the room, noting the overturned tea tray, a small shattered vase, and a curious smudge of earth upon the edge of the embroidered upholstery of the stool. Each observation tucked neatly away in her careful, methodical mind. Colonel Plumer, breathing heavily, pushed past the shocked guests to kneel at Angela's side, his movements slow, as though his limbs were suddenly leaden. "My poor girl," he whispered, his voice breaking. Eleanor hovered just behind, pale and silent, her eyes unreadable. At the edge of the crowd, voices began whispering in earnest, shock giving way to speculation. "Do you think she fainted?" whispered Miss Felicity Glover, clutching nervously at her pearls. "No fainting spell ever looked like that," replied Mrs. Marjorie Thornton tartly, fanning herself vigorously. "I've seen dead bodies before, Felicity. My brother was a coroner, after all." Miss Marple stood perfectly still, eyes alert, absorbing each fragment of conversation. She could almost see the invisible threads connecting the gathered villagers, each secret resentment, each hidden conflict a potential motive. Tragedy, she had found, rarely struck without reason, even in the most peaceful places. Gently, she touched Mrs. Bantry's trembling arm. "Perhaps we ought to phone for Inspector Craddock, Dolly. I rather fear Angela did not die by accident." Mrs. Bantry's eyes widened further, her voice dropping to an incredulous whisper. Surely, Jane, you don't mean? Miss Marple's expression remained calm, but beneath the composed exterior, her mind had begun to whir, meticulously piecing together the fragments of this bewildering scene. I'm afraid I do, she murmured softly, eyes narrowing slightly as she observed the guests clustering nervously about Angela's still figure. Something tells me there's far more hidden beneath that innocent-looking stool than anyone suspects. And with a gentle sigh, Miss Marple steeled herself for what would surely be a most unsettling and illuminating inquiry. Chapter 2. Gossip and Conjecture. It was scarcely an hour since Angela Hartley's body had been discovered, yet already the entirety of St. Mary Mead was abuzz with speculation. News, particularly of such a shocking nature, traveled swiftly in the little village. Groups of villagers gathered at gateposts, peered discreetly from behind curtains, and exchanged knowing glances across hedgerows. Inspector Craddock, summoned promptly at Miss Marple's quiet suggestion, arrived with brisk efficiency, accompanied by his younger constable, Hawkins, who was slightly overwhelmed by the grim atmosphere of Willow Cottage. After carefully examining the drawing room and conferring privately with the visibly shaken Colonel Plumer and his wife, the inspector emerged onto the front lawn, brow furrowed deeply. "Well, Miss Marple," he said with respectful acknowledgement, noting her quiet presence just beyond the threshold, "this is an unfortunate affair. I don't suppose you happened to notice anything unusual during the tea gathering?" Miss Marple's gaze was placid but sharp. "Inspector, as you well know, my eyes aren't quite what they once were," she said mildly. "But I did notice one or two peculiarities." Inspector Craddock knew better than to underestimate the elderly woman whose subtle observations had often proven invaluable. Indeed, he encouraged her gently. "For one," Miss Marple continued, "Angela Hartley seemed unusually nervous today, most unlike her usual vivacious self. I also noticed a rather curious disagreement between Colonel and Mrs. Plumer shortly before the tragic incident, though I dare say it might not mean anything at all." "I see." Craddock nodded thoughtfully, jotting something briefly in his notebook. "We'll certainly follow that up. Anything else?" Miss Marple hesitated briefly before adding softly, "I noticed a smudge of earth, rather dark, damp earth, on the upholstery of that lovely embroidered stool near Angela. Most puzzling, I thought, given how fastidious Mrs. Bantry keeps her home." Craddock glanced sharply at her, his interest now genuinely piqued. "Thank you, Miss Marple. That might indeed prove significant." He moved back into the cottage with renewed purpose, leaving Miss Marple to gently make her way along the garden path. Though the scene was tragic, she observed the villagers milling outside Willow Cottage with detached interest. Tragedy, she knew from long experience, often prompted the most illuminating behaviors from those most closely involved. Near the gate, a small gathering of women, including the ever-watchful Miss Felicity Glover and her friend, the blunt Mrs. Thornton, whispered fervently. Miss Marple drew nearer, her unobtrusive demeanor allowing her to blend seamlessly into the conversation. "I never did trust Eleanor Plumer," Mrs. Thornton declared decisively, dabbing a scented handkerchief against her flushed cheeks. "Always too composed, too controlled. I've said it for years." Miss Glover clucked her tongue gently. "Surely you don't think Eleanor capable of murder?" Mrs. Thornton waved her handkerchief dramatically. "Well, one never knows, Felicity. And Colonel Plumer himself has been so distracted of late. Almost secretive, if you ask me." Miss Marple murmured gently from the edge of the group. "Indeed, one never knows what goes on behind closed doors, do they?" Miss Glover turned toward her gratefully. "Exactly, Miss Marple. People always think they know their neighbors so well, but really, who can tell? I remember when Angela first arrived from London. She was so bright, such a breath of fresh air. But lately, I had noticed she'd become rather withdrawn, poor dear. Troubled, perhaps." Mrs. Thornton narrowed her eyes thoughtfully. "You're quite right. Come to think of it, I did see Angela speaking rather heatedly with young Timothy Faraday at the fete last week. Timothy was quite red in the face, though I couldn't hear a word they said." "Timothy Faraday?" Miss Marple inquired gently, curiosity prompting her to probe further. "Why would he have cause to quarrel with Angela?" Miss Glover glanced around nervously before leaning in confidentially. "Timothy was rather sweet on Angela when she first arrived. Everyone saw it. But lately, he's been courting Catherine Wilder, the vicar's daughter. Perhaps Angela didn't take kindly to being replaced. Love and jealousy. Mrs. Thornton sniffed dismissively. It wouldn't be the first time such feelings led to something tragic. Miss Marple's eyes flickered thoughtfully toward Timothy Faraday, who stood at the garden's far end, a pale and miserable-looking young man, clearly stricken by the day's events. Beside him stood Catherine Wilder, her arm lightly touching his in an unmistakable gesture of support. Curious indeed, Miss Marple thought. Mrs. Bantry, catching sight of Miss Marple, hurried over to her friend, shaking her head miserably. "Oh, Jane, it's dreadful. To think this happened right in my own home. Poor Angela. And to think, someone we know must be responsible." "Yes, Dolly," Miss Marple responded soothingly. "That's often the worst part, isn't it? Discovering just how little we truly know about those closest to us." Mrs. Bantry shivered slightly despite the warmth of the afternoon sun. "Inspector Craddock has asked everyone to remain close by. Jane, you don't suppose that means he suspects one of us, do you?" "Suspect," Miss Marple echoed quietly. "Perhaps considering possibilities might be a kinder way of putting it. Nevertheless, it would seem someone here has reason enough to wish poor Angela harm." The two friends turned their gaze toward the house, where Inspector Craddock was visible through the window, talking sternly to Colonel Plumer. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed ever so slightly as she noted Eleanor standing silently to one side, her hands clasped tensely, her eyes fixed intently on the upholstery stool now removed from the drawing room and placed outside for inspection. The afternoon wore slowly into evening, and as Inspector Craddock and Constable Hawkins carefully collected their evidence, a new hush settled over Willow Cottage. Yet behind closed doors, whispered suspicions and dark conjectures flourished. Miss Marple, sitting quietly with Mrs. Bantry near the rose bushes once again, observed it all. The earth smudge, Angela's recent troubled demeanor, Colonel and Mrs. Plumer's tense disagreement, and Timothy Faraday's recent romantic entanglements, all delicate threads woven into a tapestry of suspicion. "Do you have any idea yet, Jane?" Mrs. Bantry asked quietly, looking at her friend with hopeful anxiety. "Not entirely, Dolly," Miss Marple replied, her eyes twinkling gently with keen determination. "But I fear it's becoming increasingly clear that Angela's death was not merely a tragic accident, and certainly not random." She paused thoughtfully, her voice growing softer. "No, indeed. I rather suspect this is one of those very human crimes, hidden beneath familiar smiles and friendly words, perhaps even in something as innocuous as an upholstered stool." And with quiet resolve, Miss Marple steeled herself for the intricate puzzle that awaited unraveling, mindful that each subtle clue, each hushed secret, would lead inevitably closer to the painful truth hidden in the heart of St. Mary Mead. Chapter 3. Observations and Revelations. By morning, Willow Cottage was still under the shadow of tragedy. Angela Hartley's death had sent ripples of unease through St. Mary Mead, shattering the village's customary tranquility. Though Inspector Craddock had allowed guests to return home the previous evening, none could truly rest easy, and suspicion hung over every conversation like a heavy fog. Miss Marple spent a restless night herself, her keen mind carefully piecing together fragments of conversations and half-observed interactions. Morning found her up early, quietly tending her garden, allowing her thoughts to drift calmly around the details of Angela's final moments. The smudge of earth on the stool was particularly intriguing. Miss Marple paused, leaning thoughtfully on her gardening fork. Such an innocuous detail, yet precisely the kind of thing that often betrayed secrets. Damp, dark earth. There was only one spot in the vicinity that produced earth of that distinct quality, Mrs. Bantry's potting shed. "Jane, you're up dreadfully early." Mrs. Bantry appeared, her face pale beneath her garden hat. She seemed even more shaken than yesterday. Miss Marple gave her friend a reassuring smile. "I often find gardening helps clear the mind, Dolly. Would you care to join me?" Mrs. Bantry nodded gratefully, and together they walked slowly toward the rear of the garden where the potting shed stood. It was a neat little building of weathered wood, slightly hidden behind thick clusters of lavender and rosemary. The door stood slightly ajar, prompting Miss Marple's eyes to narrow slightly. "Dolly, do you always leave the shed unlocked?" Mrs. Bantry shook her head slowly. "Oh, heavens no. George always insists on locking up, ever since our best pruning shears vanished last year. It's most odd, actually. He's always meticulous about it. Miss Marple stepped closer and nudged the door gently open. Inside, everything appeared in perfect order. Pots stacked neatly, sacks of compost tidily arranged. Yet her sharp eyes quickly noted two small, but significant details: a disturbed patch of soil near the workbench, and a small muddy footprint, clearly defined on the wooden floorboards. "Jane," Mrs. Bantry gasped softly, her voice barely audible. "Do you suppose someone was hiding here yesterday? How dreadful." "It's quite possible, Dolly," Miss Marple agreed gently. "Perhaps someone hoping to remain unseen during the tea gathering. Angela's murderer, perhaps, or someone connected to the crime." They stood silently for a moment, absorbing the implications, before returning thoughtfully to the garden. Just then, voices drifted from beyond the hedgerow, loud enough to draw Miss Marple's attention. Timothy Faraday and Catherine Wilder had paused on the lane nearby, unaware of the two women's proximity. Miss Marple, never one to eavesdrop unnecessarily, nonetheless paused discreetly behind the tall hydrangeas, intrigued by their hurried conversation. "It wasn't me, Kathy," Timothy was insisting, his voice strained and pleading. "You must believe me." "Of course I believe you," Catherine replied gently, yet her voice was hesitant. "But why did you argue with Angela at the fete? You've never explained properly, Tim." "It's complicated," Timothy answered, sounding helpless and defeated. "She had. Well, she said she knew something about Colonel Plumer, something shocking. She wanted to tell someone, and I told her to leave it alone." Miss Marple felt a quiet thrill of interest at this revelation, even as Catherine responded softly, her tone fearful. "What sort of thing, Tim? Surely Angela wasn't involved in anything improper." "I don't know," Timothy admitted, his voice miserable. "She hinted that Colonel Plumer wasn't who everyone thought. Angela said he had secrets, serious ones. And now she's dead, and I feel responsible because I didn't take her seriously." Their voices trailed off as they moved away, unaware of their elderly audience. Mrs. Bantry looked anxiously at Miss Marple, her expression alarmed. "Colonel Plumer? What could Angela possibly have discovered?" "Indeed," Miss Marple murmured, her mind rapidly assessing the new possibilities. Colonel Plumer's past had always been vaguely respectable, though little was known beyond his military career in India. His return to St. Mary Mead several years ago had seemed innocent enough. Yet Miss Marple knew all too well how frequently such pasts contained darker secrets. Shortly thereafter, Miss Marple made her way slowly toward the village, mulling over Timothy Faraday's troubling revelation. Her route passed by the small parish church, where Reverend Wilder was tending to the flower beds beside the gate. "Good morning, Reverend," Miss Marple greeted him gently. Reverend Wilder straightened and offered her a weary smile. "Good morning, Miss Marple. A sad day for our little community. Angela's passing is such a shock." "It is indeed," Miss Marple agreed quietly, joining him at the flower bed. "Tell me, Reverend, did you know Angela well?" He sighed heavily, removing his gardening gloves. "Not particularly. She attended services occasionally but kept somewhat distant, though she and Catherine were friendly. Recently, though, I did notice a change. She seemed troubled, distracted perhaps. Did she confide anything to Catherine, do you suppose?" Miss Marple asked carefully, watching his reaction closely. Reverend Wilder hesitated briefly before responding. "If she did, Catherine has not spoken of it, though I sensed something was amiss between Angela and Colonel Plumer. Eleanor, too, was quite distressed of late, unusually withdrawn." "Ah, yes," Miss Marple said softly. "Family dynamics can be quite complicated, can't they?" Reverend Wilder nodded solemnly. "Indeed. It makes one wonder just how well we ever truly know anyone." Leaving the Reverend to his garden, Miss Marple moved thoughtfully on. As she approached the village square, her sharp eyes caught sight of Colonel Plumer himself, sitting stiffly on a bench outside the local tea shop. He was alone, seemingly lost in thought, his face etched with grief and anxiety. Miss Marple paused, considering carefully before approaching him gently. "Good morning, Colonel. Such a difficult time for you and Eleanor. You have my deepest sympathies." Colonel Plumer glanced up, startled briefly, before managing a strained smile. "Thank you, Miss Marple. It's all quite dreadful. Angela was, well, she was like a daughter to us. Eleanor is beside herself." Miss Marple chose her next words carefully, watching his reaction closely. I imagine Angela confided in you both. Young women often rely heavily upon family in times of trouble. A flicker of unease passed briefly across the colonel's face, quickly concealed. Yes, naturally. Angela spoke to Eleanor mostly, of course. They shared much more. Eleanor has always been the confidant. Miss Marple nodded gently, her mind swiftly cataloging the hesitations, subtle tensions, and evasions. Each new conversation added to the intricate web of secrecy and suspicion enveloping the village. Returning homeward, Miss Marple felt the familiar stirring of anticipation mixed with quiet dread. The pieces were beginning to align, yet many remained unclear. She could sense the threads pulling tighter, drawing toward an answer that promised painful revelations for those involved. Pausing at her garden gate, Miss Marple glanced once more toward Willow Cottage. The upholstered stool, that innocent object now central to tragedy, seemed symbolic of the village itself, beautifully crafted on the surface, yet hiding darker secrets beneath its carefully stitched fabric. Indeed, she murmured softly, the truth may lie far deeper than any of us yet realize. Chapter 4: Shadows of the Past. Inspector Craddock stood grimly in the modest drawing room of Willow Cottage, examining the upholstered stool that had occupied his thoughts overnight. The faint smudge of dark earth Miss Marple had pointed out was indeed curious. He carefully brushed a fingertip over the dried mud, his brow furrowing in contemplation. Outside, St. Mary Mead was already stirring, villagers passing slowly and furtively, eyes lingering uneasily on the cottage windows. Rumors had spread quickly, fueled by whispers about Angela Hartley's troubled final days and Colonel Plumer's supposed secrets. Craddock straightened as Constable Hawkins entered, holding a small notebook filled with hastily scrawled observations. Well, Hawkins, anything useful? The inspector inquired briskly. Yes, sir. It seems Angela Hartley visited the village solicitor, Mr. Everett, just 2 days before her death. Mrs. Fowler at the bakery claims she saw Angela leaving his office looking quite upset. Interesting indeed, Craddock mused, pacing thoughtfully. And Colonel Plumer? Hawkins cleared his throat, glancing at his notes. Well, sir, the colonel served a distinguished career in India. But Miss Thornton recalled something about an incident years ago involving Colonel Plumer's regiment. A scandal involving missing funds and accusations never quite proven. He was cleared officially, but she suggested that the whispers had followed him home. Craddock's frown deepened. An old scandal resurfacing? Could Angela have stumbled upon something related? Possibly, sir. Miss Glover said Angela had lately grown distant from the Plumers, as though she no longer trusted them. Inspector Craddock nodded gravely, the shadow of suspicion deepening over Colonel Plumer. Very well, Hawkins. Let's pay Mr. Everett a visit. Perhaps he can shed some light on Angela's recent concerns. As the policemen departed Willow Cottage, Miss Marple, who had been quietly observing their movements from her own garden, decided a gentle visit of her own was necessary. Solicitors, she knew from long experience, were cautious by nature, yet occasionally revealed far more than they intended. Mr. Everett's office was located on the high street, discreetly set behind lace-curtained windows. Miss Marple entered quietly, greeted by the elderly solicitor with mild surprise. Miss Marple, how may I assist you today? Everett asked courteously, adjusting his spectacles. Good morning, Mr. Everett. Such sad news about Angela Hartley, isn't it? She began softly. The village is quite shaken. Mr. Everett sighed deeply. Indeed, Miss Marple, very troubling. Angela was here only days ago. I wish now I'd pressed her harder about her concerns. Concerns? Miss Marple gently prompted, her eyes attentive. Everett hesitated briefly, choosing his words carefully. I must respect confidentiality, Miss Marple, as you understand. However, Angela seemed deeply distressed about a personal matter. She mentioned discovering something quite disturbing about someone close to her. Miss Marple nodded slowly, her voice low and reassuring. Poor girl. One can't help but wonder if her discovery might have something to do with her tragic end. Everett leaned forward, lowering his voice instinctively. It's troubling indeed. She spoke vaguely about documents, old letters or records, that she'd found accidentally. Angela mentioned confronting Colonel Plumer, but he denied everything, became quite angry, apparently. Letters, indeed, Miss Marple murmured thoughtfully. Such documents could prove very dangerous in the wrong hands. Precisely, Everett agreed gravely. Angela wanted advice, legal protection. I urged her to be cautious, but I fear my warnings came too late. Miss Marple thanked Mr. Everett sincerely, leaving the office with fresh questions turning over in her mind. The letters Angela had uncovered might indeed be at the heart of this mystery, yet the connection to the stool remained unclear. As she walked homeward through the village, her mind occupied with theories, Miss Marple observed Catherine Wilder speaking animatedly with Eleanor Plumer near the village green. Eleanor, normally so composed, looked visibly distressed, shaking her head vigorously as Catherine spoke earnestly. Curious, Miss Marple slowed her steps, carefully remaining out of sight. "Please, Mrs. Plumer," Catherine implored gently. "You must speak openly with the inspector. Tim is terribly upset." Angela told him something worrying, something he feels might help explain what happened to her. Eleanor pressed a trembling hand to her forehead, visibly conflicted. "Oh, Catherine, if only you understood. Henry has suffered enough from old accusations. Bringing it up again, it might destroy him completely. But Angela is dead," Catherine whispered urgently, eyes wide with pleading. "Surely the truth matters more than reputations?" Eleanor hesitated, her shoulders slumped in defeat. "Very well. I promise I'll speak with Inspector Craddock. Angela deserves the truth to come out." Miss Marple quietly resumed her walk home, her thoughts swiftly piecing these fragments into a clearer picture. Angela Hartley, young and idealistic, had inadvertently disturbed old secrets deeply rooted in Colonel Plumer's past. Such revelations were dangerous indeed, capable of inspiring desperate actions. Upon reaching her cottage, Miss Marple noticed Colonel Plumer himself standing awkwardly by her gate, clearly waiting for her. His expression was strained, a man haunted by guilt and fear. "Miss Marple," he began haltingly, his voice heavy. "I wonder if you might spare me a moment." "Certainly, Colonel," she replied gently, opening the gate and inviting him into the garden. They settled quietly beneath the shade of an old elm. Colonel Plumer struggled visibly before speaking. "Angela discovered letters from a difficult period during my military career. Accusations were made about missing funds, terrible lies, I assure you. Angela confronted me, believing them true. It distressed her terribly, and I fear her discovery led somehow to this tragedy." Miss Marple regarded him compassionately, but carefully. "These letters, were they ever truly disproven, Colonel?" He hesitated, eyes filled with bitter regret. "Officially, yes, but whispers lingered. Angela must have misunderstood or found partial evidence. But I swear to you, Miss Marple, I could never harm Angela." Miss Marple nodded gently, her face calm and unreadable. "Thank you for confiding in me, Colonel. Truth often emerges painfully, doesn't it?" As he left, shoulders bowed beneath the weight of his troubled past. Miss Marple remained seated, quietly absorbing all she had learned. These letters, she felt certain, were crucial. Yet something still troubled her. The stool, the earth, the potting shed. Angela had died surrounded by questions and secrets, yet the truth remained elusive, hidden cleverly beneath layers of respectable village life. "Yes," Miss Marple whispered softly to herself. "The answer to Angela's death surely lies closer still, hidden where none of us have yet thought to look." Chapter 5. Beneath the Surface. Miss Marple's evening was spent quietly, yet her mind was anything but calm. The conversation with Colonel Plumer had added new dimensions to the puzzle of Angela Hartley's death. The old accusations, whispered scandals, and recently discovered letters were intriguing indeed. But Miss Marple's instincts whispered that something else entirely remained hidden beneath these tangled threads, something simple, yet cunningly overlooked. Early the next morning, after a light breakfast, Miss Marple again walked toward Willow Cottage. Passing by the familiar hedgerows, she observed villagers whispering cautiously, expressions wary and unsettled. Fear, suspicion, and gossip flourished naturally in small communities, especially after a tragedy. Each villager, Miss Marple knew, carried secret regrets and hidden rivalries, waiting only for a spark to ignite into something darker. At Willow Cottage, Mrs. Bantry greeted her warmly, yet nervously, clearly grateful for her friend's steady presence. Inspector Craddock was already there, standing solemnly beside Eleanor Plumer in the cottage drawing room, closely examining the infamous upholstered stool. "I'm terribly sorry to disturb you further, Mrs. Plumer," the inspector said gently, his voice calm yet firm. "But we must fully understand Angela's movements. Could you confirm precisely when you last saw Angela alive?" Eleanor sighed deeply, glancing uneasily at her husband, who stood silently beside her, his expression strained. "Angela was helping serve tea. She left the garden rather suddenly, saying she needed something from inside. That was the last I saw her until—" Eleanor's voice trembled briefly, then steadied, "until Dorothy found her." Inspector Craddock nodded thoughtfully. "And you, Colonel? Were you with your wife?" "I stepped away briefly," Colonel Plumer replied stiffly, "to speak with Reverend Wilder near the garden gate. Angela was fine when I left." Craddock noted this carefully, expression inscrutable. "Thank you. This confirms Timothy Faraday's account. He says Angela went inside moments after your departure." "Yes," Colonel Plumer murmured heavily, averting his eyes. Miss Marple, quietly observing from the doorway, noted a brief flash of unease cross Eleanor's face. Her gaze seemed drawn compulsively toward the upholstered stool, as if the innocent piece of furniture itself were the source of her distress. Curious indeed, Miss Marple thought. Inspector Craddock turned sharply toward Miss Marple. "Miss Marple, could you spare a moment?" "Of course, Inspector," she agreed, joining him outside on the garden path. Craddock regarded her seriously. "You've observed everyone closely. What do you make of Colonel and Mrs. Plumer's accounts?" Miss Marple hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Inspector, people often tell truths mingled with half-truths. I don't doubt their grief, yet I suspect neither is entirely forthcoming. Eleanor seems particularly uneasy around that stool." Craddock raised an eyebrow sharply. "The stool again?" "Yes," Miss Marple confirmed quietly. "You recall the smudge of earth? I examined the potting shed and found signs someone had hidden there, perhaps waiting for Angela. Could someone have lured her inside deliberately?" "Indeed," Craddock agreed gravely. "It aligns with our findings. Hawkins discovered footprints, small ones, in the potting shed. Female by their size. Possibly Angela's, possibly someone else's." "Interesting," Miss Marple murmured softly, eyes thoughtful. "Perhaps Angela was retrieving those letters, hidden somewhere in this cottage, and was interrupted or confronted unexpectedly." Craddock nodded slowly. "Exactly my thinking. Those letters are crucial evidence, yet we haven't located them." Miss Marple's gaze sharpened suddenly. "Inspector, perhaps they remain concealed nearby. Angela may have had little time to hide them far." Craddock straightened eagerly. "You're suggesting we search the house again?" Miss Marple smiled mildly. "Not just the house, Inspector. Consider the garden and outbuildings as well." With renewed purpose, Craddock and Hawkins immediately commenced a thorough search, carefully inspecting rooms, furniture, and cupboards. Meanwhile, Miss Marple quietly approached Mrs. Bantry, still sitting nervously in the garden. "Dolly," she began gently, "when Angela arrived from London, did she bring many personal belongings?" Mrs. Bantry nodded thoughtfully. "Several boxes and cases. Colonel Plumer insisted on storing most of them at Willow Cottage for safekeeping. Angela often mentioned a secret compartment in an old writing case, her father's heirloom. I thought little of it at the time." Miss Marple's eyes brightened with interest. "Indeed? That writing case, might it still be here?" Mrs. Bantry nodded slowly, realization dawning. "In Angela's room, tucked away beneath her dressing table." Moments later, accompanied by Inspector Craddock, Miss Marple stood quietly in Angela's tidy bedroom. The dressing table, elegant and antique, stood innocently in the corner. Craddock knelt carefully, withdrawing the writing case hidden beneath. He placed it gently on the bed, eyes narrowed with concentration as he carefully examined it. Moments later, his deft fingers discovered the hidden latch, releasing a secret drawer from its velvet-lined interior. Letters spilled forth, old, yellowed papers tied with faded ribbons, clearly untouched for decades, alongside one recent handwritten note. Miss Marple's eyes swiftly scanned the note, recognizing Angela's hurried handwriting. "Found these letters. Colonel Plumer isn't who he claims. Afraid for myself. If anything happens, know he's responsible." Craddock exhaled sharply. "Well, that complicates things." Miss Marple frowned slightly. "Inspector, this seems too convenient." Angela was intelligent, cautious. Would she truly leave such a direct accusation unsecured and easily discovered? Craddock hesitated, eyes uncertain. You suspect forgery? Miss Marple shook her head gently. Not necessarily forgery, but perhaps misdirection. Angela might indeed have suspected Colonel Plumer, yet I doubt she wrote something so incriminating unless she feared imminent harm or wished deliberately to direct suspicion. For what reason? Craddock asked, clearly troubled. Miss Marple sighed gently. Perhaps Angela believed another danger threatened her, someone unexpected. This note might have been insurance, misdirecting suspicion toward Colonel Plumer if harm befell her. Inspector Craddock exhaled deeply, nodding slowly. Then we must tread carefully. Colonel Plumer may be implicated falsely. This note doesn't fit entirely, does it? Miss Marple gazed quietly toward the window, thoughtful. Indeed, Inspector. Angela Hartley's death is complex, deeply tangled within hidden relationships and secrets carefully concealed. Yet one thing remains clear. Whoever harmed Angela understands this village's secrets intimately. Craddock frowned deeply. You mean, someone very close to home? Miss Marple smiled sadly, eyes distant, yet sharply focused. Yes, Inspector. Precisely someone very close to home. As the inspector departed, carrying the letters carefully, Miss Marple lingered quietly by the window. The village stretched innocently below, its peaceful facade deceptively calm beneath gathering shadows. She sighed softly, understanding how painful the truth would inevitably be. For beneath St. Mary Mead's gentle surface lay dangerous undercurrents, secrets powerful enough to inspire murder. And Miss Marple sensed, with absolute certainty, that she stood closer now than ever before to uncovering the true identity of Angela Hartley's killer. Chapter 6: Threads of Deception. By mid-afternoon, Willow Cottage buzzed with restrained energy. Inspector Craddock had discreetly left, bearing Angela's letters carefully tucked beneath his arm. Mrs. Bantry retreated to the comforting rituals of tea-making, her face drawn with anxiety, while Eleanor and Colonel Plumer silently kept to separate rooms, each lost in private turmoil. Miss Marple returned home, her mind filled with the intricate puzzle of Angela's death. Each clue she uncovered only seemed to lead deeper into layers of misdirection. The letters, Angela's supposed accusation, Colonel Plumer's protests of innocence. Everything felt both compelling and misleading. Seated quietly at her kitchen table, Miss Marple considered the facts carefully. Angela's movements were now clearer. She had clearly discovered something troubling about Colonel Plumer's past, confronted him, and grown fearful. Yet the note left behind seemed too obvious, too neat an accusation against the colonel. Angela, Miss Marple suspected, would have been more cautious. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Opening the door, she found Catherine Wilder standing nervously, twisting her fingers in agitation. Miss Marple, I hope I'm not disturbing you, Catherine began hesitantly. But I desperately need someone's advice. Of course, dear, Miss Marple gently reassured, guiding her into the cozy front room. You seem quite upset. Is it something about Angela? Yes, Catherine whispered, eyes troubled. Angela confided something very strange to me just days ago. I promised secrecy, but now, after everything, I don't know what to think. Please, Catherine, tell me exactly what she said. Miss Marple encouraged gently, her sharp eyes watching the young woman closely. Catherine hesitated, gathering courage before continuing softly. Angela mentioned that she felt threatened, not by Colonel Plumer directly, but by someone trying deliberately to cast suspicion onto him. She wouldn't say exactly who, only that it was someone respected, someone everyone trusted. Miss Marple sat up slightly, her interest deepening. Did she give any hint at all? Catherine's voice shook slightly. Angela said something about jealousy, deep, bitter jealousy hidden beneath kindness. But she stopped short of naming anyone, almost as if she feared even speaking the truth aloud. Jealousy, Miss Marple echoed softly, nodding thoughtfully. A powerful motive indeed. Do you suspect someone yourself, Catherine? The younger woman hesitated, visibly distressed. I hate to even suggest it, but Timothy told me Miss Glover had been increasingly resentful toward Angela. Something about Angela's easy charm, her popularity. Felicity Glover felt overshadowed and ignored, especially when Angela started helping organize village events. Indeed, Miss Marple murmured carefully, recalling Miss Glover's avid interest in the recent gossip. Felicity Glover was mild-mannered, seemingly harmless, but envy could simmer dangerously beneath even the gentlest surface. Catherine stood, her voice hushed and fearful. "I had to tell someone, Miss Marple. It might mean nothing, but perhaps it explains why Angela feared a subtle betrayal." Miss Marple gently reassured her, promising discretion. After Catherine departed, the older woman sat quietly, reflecting deeply upon this revelation. Felicity Glover certainly had motive. Jealousy could twist friendships into hatred, and Angela's vivacious presence might indeed have provoked envy. Deciding she needed to explore this further, Miss Marple donned her hat and shawl and set off quietly toward Miss Glover's quaint cottage. The garden was carefully tended, flowers blooming brightly, disguising any hint of darkness within. Miss Glover answered the door promptly, surprised but welcoming. "Miss Marple, please come in. Such terrible events recently, one hardly knows what to think." "Indeed," Miss Marple agreed softly, following her into a tidy sitting room. Her sharp eyes immediately noticed an upholstered stool, very like the one at Willow Cottage. "Curious indeed. I must say, Felicity, Angela's death has quite shaken the village." Miss Marple began conversationally. "I know you two were acquainted." Miss Glover's fingers tightened slightly around her teacup, though her smile remained composed. "We were indeed, though not closely. Angela was a bit younger, so bright and popular. Perhaps rather too much so at times." Miss Marple watched her carefully, choosing her words deliberately. "Popularity can be difficult, can it? It sometimes provokes jealousy." Miss Glover's eyes widened slightly before swiftly narrowing. "Jealousy? Whatever do you mean, Miss Marple?" "Merely that such feelings can stir beneath the surface," Miss Marple replied mildly. "Angela had such charm. One can understand how that might overshadow others." Felicity shifted uneasily, eyes flickering briefly toward the stool. "Angela could certainly draw attention," she conceded reluctantly. "But surely you're not suggesting—" "Suggesting nothing, my dear," Miss Marple soothed gently. "Only, I've wondered about Angela's fears. Perhaps she sensed hidden resentment." Miss Glover's smile faded sharply, her voice suddenly brittle. "Angela enjoyed attention. Perhaps she imagined resentments. Or perhaps she thrived on creating drama. It wouldn't be the first time." Miss Marple considered this quietly, sensing deep bitterness hidden beneath Felicity's carefully polite exterior. Yet bitterness alone did not prove guilt. Taking her leave politely, Miss Marple walked slowly homeward, mulling over this unsettling conversation. Felicity Glover certainly harbored resentment, yet was she capable of murder? The smudge of earth, the footprints, Angela's hurried note, all hinted at cunning planning rather than impulsive anger. Entering her own garden, Miss Marple paused thoughtfully by the neatly arranged flower beds. She glanced toward her potting shed and remembered distinctly the footprints Inspector Craddock mentioned. Small, feminine footprints. Angela's, or perhaps Felicity's. Then, suddenly, another thought occurred to her. Dorothy, Mrs. Bantry's maid. Dorothy had discovered Angela's body, had been nearby all afternoon. Yet everyone had overlooked her completely, assuming innocence due to familiarity. Could jealousy have existed there, unnoticed beneath quiet obedience? Miss Marple sighed softly, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. The deeper she delved, the more intricate Angela's death became. Jealousy, rivalry, hidden scandals, so many subtle threads weaving a tapestry of suspicion. She understood clearly that the truth lay carefully concealed, hidden in subtle deceptions and quiet betrayals. Yet Angela Hartley's killer had overlooked one critical detail. Miss Marple herself, observing quietly from behind innocuous conversations and discreetly asked questions. Steeling herself, Miss Marple knew the time had arrived to test these delicate threads more deliberately. The next phase of her investigation would demand subtlety and courage, perhaps even a bit of risk. But whatever the cost, Angela deserved justice, and Miss Marple was determined to ensure she received it, even if the truth shattered illusions and friendships throughout the village of St. Mary Mead. Chapter 7. A Subtle Trap. As evening descended quietly upon St. Mary Mead, Miss Marple sat thoughtfully by her drawing-room window, her knitting resting lightly upon her lap. The revelations of jealousy, resentment, and hidden grudges continued to swirl in her mind. Yet one troubling thought persisted. Someone had been carefully orchestrating suspicion, meticulously framing Colonel Plumer while hiding their own role in Angela Hartley's death. Determined to unravel the deception carefully, Miss Marple decided it was time to set a subtle yet deliberate trap, one that would gently lure the true culprit into revealing themselves unwittingly. The following morning found Miss Marple paying a discreet visit to Willow Cottage. Inspector Craddock and Constable Hawkins had already arrived, continuing their painstaking examination of evidence. Miss Marple quietly approached them, her expression serious yet gentle. "Inspector, may I propose a small gathering here this afternoon?" she suggested mildly. "A tea, perhaps. It might help ease tensions among the villagers. More importantly, it might encourage the guilty party to slip, unintentionally revealing something vital." Craddock nodded thoughtfully, understanding immediately the subtle strategy. A quiet, informal confrontation, clever indeed. "Whom shall we invite?" "Colonel and Eleanor Plumer, certainly," Miss Marple replied softly. "Also Catherine Wilder, Timothy Faraday, Felicity Glover, and Mrs. Bantry. Each has played a part, however small, in Angela's tragic story." Craddock agreed promptly, and invitations swiftly went forth, summoning the selected villagers to gather quietly at Willow Cottage that very afternoon. By late afternoon, the chosen guests had arrived, exchanging nervous pleasantries beneath the watchful gaze of Inspector Craddock and Miss Marple. Miss Marple watched carefully as Colonel Plumer and Eleanor sat quietly together, their strained relationship clearly visible. Catherine and Timothy, close together yet visibly anxious, whispered privately. Felicity Glover stood slightly apart, polite yet noticeably tense, her eyes flickering uncertainly toward the upholstered stool, now prominently positioned by Miss Marple's careful design. As tea was served and conversation turned inevitably toward Angela, Miss Marple took advantage of a lull to gently steer the discussion deliberately toward dangerous waters. Angela's death, she began mildly, was deeply tragic, yet it revealed how easily misunderstandings and envy can fester beneath friendly appearances. Angela clearly felt threatened, perhaps by someone we all trusted. Colonel Plumer shifted uneasily, Eleanor glanced downward guiltily, and Felicity stiffened subtly. Catherine and Timothy exchanged knowing looks, their discomfort clear. Miss Marple continued gently, eyes calmly observing each subtle reaction. Angela's accusation against Colonel Plumer troubled us all, but the recent discovery of forged letters suggests someone deliberately misled her. Someone who perhaps harbored quiet envy toward Colonel Plumer and Angela's popularity. At these words, Felicity's eyes flashed briefly with barely concealed resentment. Angela attracted envy easily, Felicity murmured, her voice brittle. Perhaps she enjoyed stirring trouble herself. Miss Marple's gaze sharpened gently. Yet Angela confronted someone privately, someone who deliberately deceived her. That confrontation, I fear, led directly to her death. Inspector Craddock joined carefully. Indeed, Angela was found beside this stool, its upholstery containing hidden evidence, cleverly placed to misdirect suspicion. Felicity's hands tightened visibly around her teacup, eyes locked nervously on the stool. Colonel Plumer watched silently, expression strained yet quietly hopeful. Catherine leaned forward urgently. "You mean someone deliberately tried to frame Colonel Plumer?" "Who?" Miss Marple turned slowly toward Felicity, her voice calm, yet quietly piercing. "Someone bitterly jealous, feeling overlooked and undervalued. Someone whose envy twisted into cruelty." Felicity paled sharply, her voice rising defensively. "Surely you don't suspect me, Miss Marple?" Angela misunderstood. "Misunderstood, Felicity?" Miss Marple gently interrupted. "Angela confronted you directly about forged letters accusing Colonel Plumer. Letters Timothy overheard you discussing angrily. Did she threaten to expose you?" Felicity trembled visibly, fear and anger flashing openly now. "Angela mocked me, accused me unfairly. She had no proof, only suspicion." Inspector Craddock stepped forward firmly. "Yet Angela died immediately after confronting you, Miss Glover. The stool, containing evidence planted to implicate Eleanor, was cleverly manipulated. Perhaps you intended suspicion toward Eleanor from the very start." Felicity's polite facade shattered abruptly, replaced by defiant bitterness. "Eleanor deserved suspicion. She envied Angela too. Everyone knew it. Why suspect me alone?" Miss Marple watched quietly, sadness filling her compassionate gaze. Felicity, envy and bitterness drove you deeply, but Angela's death can never justify resentment. Confess now, free yourself from bitterness's poisonous hold. Felicity stood abruptly, eyes wild, glancing around desperately for escape. Inspector Craddock quietly blocked her retreat. Defiant still, Felicity's voice trembled. Angela had everything. Attention, admiration, she flaunted it carelessly. I warned her to stop mocking me, but she refused. Her death wasn't my intention, but she pushed me too far. Miss Marple sighed softly, feeling profound sadness. Yet afterward you deliberately planted suspicion onto Eleanor, an innocent victim of your envy. Angela's death was accidental, perhaps, but your deceit afterward was coldly calculated. Felicity sank weakly into her chair, her defiance dissolving into helpless remorse. Inspector Craddock gently escorted her away, her quiet sobs filling the silent room. Colonel and Eleanor Plumer watched silently, sorrowful relief mingling with lingering unease. Catherine and Timothy sat quietly, solemn yet grateful for Justice's quiet triumph. As the guests slowly dispersed, Inspector Craddock turned respectfully toward Miss Marple. Your subtle trap worked perfectly. Felicity's guilt is clear now. Miss Marple smiled sadly, her voice softly reflective. Felicity's envy festered quietly beneath polite smiles and gentle manners, tragically unnoticed until too late. Angela's death reminds us all, human hearts are fragile, complex, easily wounded. Inspector Craddock departed quietly, leaving Miss Marple alone briefly in the silent drawing room. She gazed thoughtfully toward the upholstered stool, now innocent again, yet forever marked by tragedy. Quietly departing Willow Cottage, Miss Marple reflected deeply upon the intricate tapestry of jealousy, deception, and sorrow she had unraveled carefully. Yet one final chapter remained. The painful aftermath as St. Mary Mead gradually faced difficult truths, forgiveness, and healing. For beneath the village's peaceful surface, hidden envy and bitterness had erupted violently, forever altering gentle illusions. Miss Marple, quietly determined, knew justice alone was insufficient. Now compassion and understanding must gently heal the wounds left painfully exposed by Angela Hartley's tragic story. Chapter 8. The Stool's Silent Testimony. Miss Marple spent the evening quietly reflecting upon the tangled web surrounding Angela Hartley's death. Each revelation had deepened her suspicions, yet a central question persisted. What was truly hidden inside the upholstered stool that had drawn everyone's attention? The following morning found her once more at Willow Cottage, Inspector Craddock at her side. Craddock, ever respectful of Miss Marple's insights, had returned promptly when she shared her suspicions about the stool's hidden significance. Inspector, Miss Marple said gently, as they stood in the empty drawing room, eyes fixed upon the stool. I believe we've overlooked something crucial. Angela's death may indeed center upon this seemingly innocent object. Craddock examined it closely once again, turning it carefully. It looks entirely ordinary. Are you suggesting there's something hidden inside? Precisely, Inspector. Miss Marple agreed, her voice quietly confident. Angela's body lay beside it, and Eleanor Plumer has shown unusual anxiety whenever it's mentioned. Perhaps Angela disturbed something within. With careful precision, Craddock removed a small penknife, gently testing the upholstery seams. After several moments, his blade slipped carefully beneath one corner, revealing a discreetly concealed opening. Inside lay a small, leather-bound diary, its cover worn with age and careful handling. Craddock carefully withdrew it, eyes widening slightly. Angela's? No, Miss Marple observed quietly. Much older, perhaps belonging originally to Colonel Plumer or his wife. Clearly deliberately hidden. As Craddock opened the diary, delicate pages filled with faded handwriting emerged, entries dating back many years. Quickly skimming, his face became grave. These entries speak of a long-standing resentment, jealousy, suspicion, and betrayal, dating from Colonel Plumer's early marriage. Miss Marple gently accepted the diary, reading swiftly and carefully, her keen mind quickly absorbing its contents. A complicated portrait emerged, Eleanor Plumer, deeply insecure in her marriage, harboring secret jealousies toward anyone who came between herself and her husband's affection. Entries described anxieties about her husband's fondness toward a niece, Angela herself. Eleanor's jealousy, Miss Marple murmured thoughtfully, long hidden beneath polite reserve. Angela discovered this diary, realized Eleanor secretly resented her closeness to Colonel Plumer. Craddock nodded, his voice grim. But Eleanor's resentment alone might not be motive enough for murder. Miss Marple paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. Indeed. Yet consider, Angela recently discovered Colonel Plumer's past scandal. Perhaps she confronted him directly, and Eleanor misunderstood, seeing Angela as deliberately undermining their marriage. At that moment, a faint sound interrupted their conversation, footsteps in the hallway outside. Miss Marple's sharp eyes caught sight of Eleanor herself lingering hesitantly in the doorway. "Mrs. Plumer," Craddock greeted solemnly. "Perhaps you might help explain why this diary was hidden within this stool?" Eleanor's face turned ashen. Her voice trembled slightly. "That diary, it's private. How did you find it?" "Hidden inside this stool, Mrs. Plumer," Craddock replied firmly. "Why did you conceal it here?" Eleanor glanced helplessly at Miss Marple, whose quiet gaze prompted reluctant honesty. She sank onto a chair, visibly distressed. "Years ago, I worried constantly that Henry, Colonel Plumer, preferred Angela's mother, my own sister. When Angela came here, resembling her mother so vividly, my fears returned. Henry adored Angela as a daughter, but irrational jealousy overwhelmed me again. Angela discovered this diary," Miss Marple gently suggested, "and confronted you?" Eleanor shook her head, tearfully honest. "No, she confronted Henry, believing he'd betrayed her mother years ago. I overheard them arguing, Angela accusing Henry bitterly. My foolish fears resurfaced. I imagined Angela deliberately turning Henry against me. But I swear, I never harmed Angela." Miss Marple's eyes softened slightly. Eleanor's pain seemed genuine. Perhaps jealousy alone wasn't enough motive, yet Eleanor's revelation provided crucial context. A sudden thought occurred to Miss Marple. She turned quickly toward Inspector Craddock. "Inspector, do we know for certain Angela placed the diary within the stool herself?" Craddock frowned deeply. "We assumed, but perhaps not." Miss Marple nodded quickly. "Indeed, Angela might have confronted someone else, someone who deliberately placed this diary here afterward, intending suspicion toward Eleanor. Consider again who benefited most directly." They fell briefly silent, considering carefully. Then Craddock's face darkened thoughtfully. "Colonel Plumer himself?" Miss Marple gently shook her head. "I think not. Colonel Plumer stands to lose most deeply from Angela's death, his niece murdered, his past scandal exposed. No, someone else entirely." They both exchanged knowing looks. The truth seemed tantalizingly close, yet one piece remained missing. At that precise moment, Timothy Faraday appeared hesitantly in the doorway, glancing nervously at them both. "Inspector, Miss Marple, I have something urgent to confess." Miss Marple's gaze sharpened gently. "Go on, Timothy." He took a shaky breath. Angela wasn't angry at Colonel Plumer about the past. She was upset because someone deliberately showed her misleading letters, trying to turn her against him. Angela realized the letters had been forged by someone desperate to frame Colonel Plumer, someone who resented his prominence deeply. Inspector Craddock's voice turned sharply urgent. "Who, Timothy?" Timothy swallowed painfully, eyes filled with guilt. "Miss Felicity Glover." Angela confronted her privately at the fete, telling her she knew of the deception. Miss Glover was furious, warning Angela to stay silent or face consequences. Miss Marple inhaled softly, feeling the truth finally crystallize. Felicity Glover, quiet and unassuming, yet secretly bitter, filled with envy toward Colonel Plumer's family prominence and Angela's popularity. The diary had merely been a clever distraction, planting suspicion firmly on Eleanor. "Inspector," Miss Marple murmured gently. "Felicity Glover deliberately orchestrated suspicion. Angela's death was indeed carefully planned, but by someone no one suspected." Inspector Craddock nodded gravely, quickly instructing Hawkins to locate Miss Glover immediately. As the policeman departed hurriedly, Eleanor sat quietly, weeping softly. Miss Marple gently comforted her, feeling deep compassion for the pain and misunderstandings that had led to this moment. Yet even as relief spread through Willow Cottage, Miss Marple understood another confrontation loomed, the final, dangerous engagement with Felicity Glover, whose quiet bitterness had masked deadly intent. Steeling herself carefully, Miss Marple knew this case demanded one final test, delicate, subtle, yet absolutely crucial. Felicity Glover had already proven cunning and dangerous, willing to frame innocence to protect herself. But justice required absolute certainty, and Miss Marple was determined to secure it, whatever risk she herself must quietly face. Chapter 9: The Quiet Confrontation. By late afternoon, St. Mary Mead felt stifled by a tense silence, the usual gentle murmurs of village life suspended as if awaiting a storm. Inspector Craddock and Constable Hawkins had quietly departed Willow Cottage, urgently seeking Felicity Glover, yet Miss Marple felt a quiet unease. Felicity was cautious, cunning beneath her outward timidity. Confronting her would require careful subtlety. Returning home, Miss Marple sat thoughtfully by her kitchen window, eyes fixed on the street, lost in contemplation. Felicity Glover had maintained an image of polite gentility, quiet, overlooked, seemingly incapable of malice. Yet envy and bitterness, Miss Marple knew, often simmered unseen behind gentle facades. As evening settled quietly upon the village, Miss Marple decided she could no longer remain passive. Rising slowly, she gathered her shawl and hat, preparing herself carefully for a confrontation she knew would test every ounce of her subtlety and courage. The lane toward Miss Glover's cottage lay peaceful beneath the twilight sky, yet shadows seemed deeper tonight, secrets hidden beneath calm surfaces. Arriving at Felicity's neatly tended garden, Miss Marple took a calming breath before knocking softly upon the door. Felicity answered slowly, her eyes briefly widening in startled recognition. Quickly recovering her composure, she smiled politely, though her gaze remained wary. "Miss Marple, this is a surprise. Is there something I can help you with?" Miss Marple smiled gently, her voice mild and disarming. "I'm terribly sorry to disturb you, Felicity, but there's something important I must discuss. Might I come in for just a moment?" Felicity hesitated briefly before stepping aside reluctantly. Miss Marple entered carefully, noting once again the tasteful arrangement of the cottage interior. Yet tonight she saw beneath its gentle exterior a carefully maintained disguise. Seating herself carefully, Miss Marple regarded Felicity calmly. "I understand Inspector Craddock has been trying to speak with you." Felicity's eyes narrowed subtly, her voice carefully controlled. "I haven't spoken with him yet. Why should I?" Miss Marple sighed softly, her voice quietly sympathetic. "Angela's death has been terribly distressing for everyone. Yet recent developments suggest Angela's murderer deliberately attempted to misdirect suspicion onto innocent people." Felicity shifted uncomfortably, her expression unreadable. "How terrible! But surely Inspector Craddock doesn't suspect me." Miss Marple regarded her thoughtfully. "Inspector Craddock suspects whoever attempted to frame Colonel Plumer and Eleanor with cleverly planted letters and diaries. Angela herself discovered the deception and confronted the perpetrator privately. Perhaps you recall that conversation, Felicity?" A brief flash of anger passed Felicity's eyes, quickly masked by careful innocence. "I'm afraid I don't understand, Miss Marple. Angela and I barely spoke privately." Miss Marple continued gently, calmly pressing forward. "Yet Timothy Faraday overheard your argument at the fete. Angela accused you of forging letters suggesting Colonel Plumer betrayed his family years ago. She threatened to expose your deception, didn't she?" Felicity's polite facade wavered dangerously. Her voice tightened, quietly defiant. "Angela misunderstood things entirely. She exaggerated trivialities. Angela always craved attention. Yet your resentment toward Angela ran deep." Miss Marple gently interrupted. "You envied her popularity, her position in Colonel Plumer's affection. Perhaps you felt overshadowed, unnoticed. Such feelings can fester quietly, Felicity, turning friendships bitter." Felicity's hands clenched tightly, her composure fraying visibly. "You're mistaken. Angela had everything: admiration, charm, affection from everyone. She took it for granted, flaunted it openly. Someone needed to teach her humility." Miss Marple leaned forward quietly, her voice soft yet piercing. "And did you feel justified teaching her that lesson, Felicity?" A tense silence followed, filled only by Felicity's quickened breathing. Her eyes, no longer guarded, flashed bitterly. Angela threatened to ruin everything I'd built, my friendships, my place in the village. She mocked me privately, called me invisible, pathetic. When she confronted me about those letters, she was unbearably smug. Miss Marple remained calmly sympathetic, allowing Felicity's resentment to pour forth unchecked. Yet surely murder wasn't your intention. Felicity's voice trembled, defensive yet revealing. I just wanted her silenced, frightened, anything to protect myself. When she went into Willow Cottage alone, I followed her quietly, determined to confront her again, to convince her to remain silent. Yet Angela refused. Miss Marple murmured gently, sadly. Felicity's eyes filled suddenly with tears, of anger or regret. Miss Marple could not be certain. Angela laughed, actually laughed at me, dismissing my warnings. She turned her back, ignoring me as if I meant nothing. Something snapped. I reached out instinctively. It happened so quickly. One moment Angela stood taunting me, the next she was falling. I never meant. Her voice broke off abruptly, and Felicity looked away, suddenly frightened, realizing she had revealed far too much. Miss Marple regarded her gently, understanding deeply the bitter tragedy beneath Felicity's desperate act. Angela struck her head against the stool, an accident perhaps, yet you deliberately attempted afterward to frame Eleanor. The diary hidden in the stool was meant to incriminate Eleanor, wasn't it? Felicity trembled violently, eyes wide with panic. All pretenses vanished. I had to protect myself. I was desperate. I realized Angela was dead. I had to misdirect suspicion quickly. Eleanor was perfect, jealous, troubled. But I swear, her death wasn't planned. Miss Marple sighed softly, eyes compassionate yet firm. Yet Angela's death remains your responsibility, Felicity. Inspector Craddock must hear your full confession. Justice, however painful, must prevail. Felicity collapsed weakly into her chair, weeping softly, all bitterness replaced by helpless remorse. Miss Marple quietly rose, gently patting Felicity's trembling hand reassuringly before stepping outside and signaling discreetly toward Inspector Craddock and Constable Hawkins, who had waited quietly nearby at her request. As the policeman entered, Miss Marple stood quietly in the twilight garden, feeling deep sadness. Felicity's envy and loneliness had twisted into tragedy, destroying two lives, Angela's vibrancy, Felicity's future. Yet beneath the pain lay a deeper truth Miss Marple understood profoundly. Human hearts were infinitely complex, capable equally of kindness and cruelty, hidden beneath ordinary appearances. Walking slowly homeward, Miss Marple knew justice had been secured, but the village's wounds would linger deeply. Tomorrow would bring the painful aftermath, questions, regret, whispered gossip. Yet tonight St. Mary Mead remained silent, each villager alone with personal reflections. Pausing briefly beneath the stars, Miss Marple offered a quiet prayer for Angela's peace, Felicity's troubled soul, and the gentle innocence forever lost beneath this tragedy. Then, wrapping her shawl tightly, she continued homeward through familiar shadows, understanding deeply the fragile balance between ordinary village life and the quiet darkness that lurked always beneath its carefully constructed serenity. Chapter 10. The Peace Restored. In the days following Felicity Glover's quiet, yet shattering confession, St. Mary Mead gradually settled back into its familiar, gentle rhythm. Yet beneath the restored normalcy lingered a faint, melancholy unease. Villagers exchanged subdued greetings, avoided lingering gazes, and carefully navigated around mention of Angela Hartley and Felicity's shocking downfall. Inspector Craddock had completed his formal inquiries swiftly, and Felicity Glover had been quietly escorted from the village, her future uncertain but her guilt unmistakable. Colonel and Eleanor Plumer, initially relieved yet deeply shaken, chose to leave for London temporarily, seeking solace away from prying eyes and whispered speculation. Miss Marple, however, remained steadfastly in her cottage, quietly tending her garden and reflecting deeply upon the human frailties that had led to Angela's tragic death. Friends and neighbors passed frequently, offering tentative conversations and shy gratitude. Yet she gently refused praise, insisting she had merely pieced together fragments already lying before them all. One particularly fine afternoon found Miss Marple seated once again in Mrs. Bantry's peaceful garden, sipping tea beneath the same flowering branches that had witnessed tragedy mere days earlier. Mrs. Bantry, her spirits slowly returning, sighed deeply but contentedly as she poured a fresh cup. "I still can hardly believe it, Jane," Dolly admitted quietly. "Poor Felicity. All these years, she seemed so harmless, so utterly unremarkable." Miss Marple nodded gently, her sharp blue eyes distant yet thoughtful. "Indeed, Dolly. Yet envy is among the most insidious poisons. Felicity was overlooked, undervalued perhaps. Such feelings often fester silently, unnoticed until too late." Mrs. Bantry shivered slightly, gazing across her garden thoughtfully. "I wonder, Jane, if perhaps we all contributed unknowingly to her bitterness. Perhaps we overlooked Felicity simply because she was so quiet and modest." Miss Marple reached out gently, comforting her friend's trembling hand. "Perhaps we did, Dolly. Human nature is complex, full of subtleties easily missed until tragedy brings them sharply into focus." Their quiet conversation was gently interrupted as Catherine Wilder and Timothy Faraday appeared hesitantly at the garden gate, both seeming older, solemn in a new maturity born of sorrow. "Miss Marple," Catherine began softly, stepping forward. "Timothy and I wanted to thank you. Without your quiet wisdom, Angela might never have received justice." Miss Marple smiled softly, her expression warmly reassuring. "Justice, my dear, often requires patience and subtlety, qualities you both have demonstrated admirably throughout this difficult ordeal." Timothy nodded gravely, his young face reflecting hard-earned understanding. "Angela deserved better, Miss Marple. Yet thanks to you, at least the truth emerged clearly." They departed quietly, holding hands lightly, the shadow of tragedy deepening the sincerity of their bond. Miss Marple watched them thoughtfully, pleased by their quiet strength and newfound wisdom. Sorrow, she reflected, often nurtured compassion and deeper understanding, even amidst pain. As afternoon lengthened toward evening, Miss Marple found herself alone briefly beneath Mrs. Bantry's tranquil oaks. She gazed quietly toward Willow Cottage, its windows now shuttered carefully, silence restored but forever tinged by tragedy. Quiet footsteps approached hesitantly behind her, breaking her reverie gently. Turning slowly, she found Eleanor and Colonel Plumer standing quietly, their expressions earnest yet deeply subdued. "Miss Marple," Colonel Plumer began softly, voice trembling slightly. "We depart tomorrow for London. Yet we couldn't leave without expressing our gratitude." Eleanor nodded quietly, her expression remorseful. "We never imagined Felicity harbored such bitterness, nor did we fully understand Angela's true fears. Your insights, your quiet wisdom, saved us from further misunderstandings." Miss Marple smiled gently, her voice quietly reassuring. "Understanding human hearts, my dear Eleanor, requires constant attention and gentle patience. Jealousy, suspicion, loneliness, all easily overlooked until tragedy forces us to see clearly." Eleanor sighed softly, her voice sincere and regretful. "I allowed my own fears and insecurities to blind me. Angela deserved better from us." Miss Marple gently placed her hand on Eleanor's arm. "Angela's spirit remains at peace now. Truth has restored her honor, and Felicity's troubled soul will find healing through facing justice. Be gentle with yourselves now. Remember Angela fondly, but forgive yourselves your human frailties." After the Plumers departed quietly, Miss Marple lingered thoughtfully beneath the gathering twilight, the village quieting gradually around her. Stars began softly appearing, lighting St. Mary Mead gently once more. Returning home slowly, Miss Marple paused briefly at her garden gate, reflecting deeply. Angela's death had been tragic, deeply unsettling, yet ultimately illuminating. Each villager had confronted painful truths, forced to recognize hidden jealousies and resentments. Perhaps such recognition, though painful, would ultimately strengthen them all, bringing greater compassion and awareness. Inside her cozy cottage, she quietly removed her shawl, settling comfortably into her familiar armchair, her gaze falling softly upon her knitting basket. Picking up her needles thoughtfully, she began gently knitting, the familiar rhythm calming her troubled thoughts. She realized profoundly, yet again, how delicately balanced human nature truly was, capable of kindness and cruelty, generosity and envy, loyalty and betrayal. Such complexities endlessly fascinated her, yet always reminded her to observe closely, patiently, quietly, never underestimating the hidden darkness beneath ordinary appearances. As night gently enveloped St. Mary Mead, Miss Marple continued knitting quietly, her thoughts peaceful yet solemn. Angela Hartley's story was tragically concluded, justice secured, yet the deeper truths remained. Human hearts were fragile, vulnerable, easily wounded by loneliness and envy. Yet beneath such frailties lay resilience and courage, qualities she'd observed in Catherine and Timothy, in Eleanor and Colonel Plumer, even within Felicity's remorseful confession. Perhaps, Miss Marple reflected gently, tragedy inevitably revealed humanity's best and worst, but above all, it illuminated their shared, fragile humanity. Settling comfortably, Miss Marple closed her eyes briefly, murmuring softly, "Rest peacefully, Angela. Your death has reminded us all of truths easily forgotten. May your spirit find gentle comfort now." Outside, stars quietly watched over St. Mary Mead, silent yet comforting, illuminating a village forever changed, yet gently healing beneath the watchful care of its most quietly brilliant observer, Miss Jane Marple herself.